the floor to Marco Perduca, former senator in Italy, coordinator Science for Democracy.
Thanks again. Jason and Massimo Introvigna have already raised some of the structural elements of the anti-cult actions or movement, as Introvigna has called them. I've seen that now there are new ways of talking about these groups, especially in Italy. We talk a lot about Satanist groups, or the latest wave apparently is the so-called psychosex. So there is an evolution also in terms of language of the object of all these studies and activities. But I think we have, in a way, to take Italy perhaps out of the bunch of countries that have been presented before, because of our peculiar relationship with a religion in particular, which is, of course, the Catholic religion and the Catholic Church, Italy being also the host country of the Holy See, which is the place where this religion finds its main headquarters. And I think, and I totally agree with what Dr. Introvigna has said before, sometimes it is these kinds of activities are carried out or promoted, perhaps not necessarily directly, but they are implied in their common actions and knowledge, that is the big, well-established religion organization that is suggesting that the other smaller or newer, at least in a specific place, not because they may be more recent than the Catholic Church, pose a threat not necessarily to the main religion or religious groups, but sometimes to society as a whole. But I'm a former member of the Italian Parliament, so I would like to concentrate more on the legal/political aspects of the activities that have been carried out under this umbrella of anti-cult actions. And let me go back to the Italian Constitution. The Italian Constitution in Article 7 states that the state and the Catholic Church are, each in their own order, independent and sovereign. Their relations are regulated by the Lateran Pacts. Amended to the pacts have been accepted by two parties later on in the 20s, in the name of Concordat, if I may translate it that, and do not require a constitutional revision procedure. So in a way, they can be changed according to the will of the two parties, and the will of the two parties was reiterated in the early 80s with this Concordato Concordat, which serves as a model for other European countries. I can think, for instance, about Poland and Croatia that have this kind of special relationship with the Catholic Church. Article 8, on the other hand, says that all religious denominations are equally free before the law. Religious confessions other than the Catholic Church have the right to organize themselves according to their own statutes, as they do not conflict with the Italian legal system. The relations with the state are regulated by law on the basis of agreements with the relevant representatives. After the Constitution was adopted over 70 years ago, additional laws have established the relationship between the government, so the state, and religious groups that in a way do not speak in a comprehensive way of freedom of religion or belief. And I do not think that we need special laws to grant freedom of religion or a cult, because what we have in the Constitution is already particularly clear. What has been adopted over the years is a special relationship in financial terms between the state and religious groups, that they get money directly, not from the state, but through a complicated mechanism in which some parts of people taxes are channeled to the religious groups that are recognized by the state, and not only recognized by the state, but also allowed to join this scheme of redistribution of taxes that we called 8 per mil, which is 0.8% of our taxes can go to a religious group. Now, after the decrease of public interest in religious, a tricky mechanism was set up that allows religious denomination to participate in a redistribution of the undistributed percentage of money that the Italians did not want to give to religious groups, according to the percentage of those that had in fact ticked the box expressing their preference. So to make a long story short, let's say that only 30% of Italians decided to give money to one of the religious organizations recognized, and within this 30%, 80% checks the Catholic Church. The entire 80% of the 8 per meal goes to the Catholic Church, which at the end of the day is over €1 billion a year to do nothing, and which is not also receiving any kind of competition from the state, which is also one of the other entities that can get this amount of money. I am saying this because sometimes if you scratch very well the surface, you will find gold is actually what we are talking about rather than general principles or religious feelings. The other problem that there is again, has been mentioned before by Dr. Introvegna, is that we are talking about problems that are being shared with authorities, not necessarily by people that are suffering some sort of human rights violation, because I would call it like that if there is one, and therefore violation of the criminal code, but by people that have left the groups or relatives of the groups, of the people, members of the group, or anti-cult groups that have specific departments that do the work. And even if Italy's, or to the best of my knowledge, perhaps Dr. Introvegna may know more, but I found that the latest report on this kind of cults goes back to 1998, with some numbers that, of course, might have changed over the years. And so we really don't know the dimension of the phenomenon that we're talking about when we talk about these things in the Italian context. These groups have become the experts without any kind of criticism coming from anybody, because not many people know that these groups are active, and they also are in consultation with the police. But when they organize their national conferences, you have journalists that go there, take notes, or do a cut and paste of the press releases, and this is what remains in the news. So that is what comes out of this conference. And in preparing for today's webinar, I searched the internet, and I found some interesting news that in particular concentrated in 2018, when Italy had, for the first time in its history, a coalition government made by two political parties that ran one against the other, but they were able to find some sort of an agreement to form a government, which was, as it was portrayed in the Italian media, and to a certain degree I would agree with that, populist and sovereignist, or sovereign in particular, nationalist. And so, and they had a gentleman, the leader of one of the two parties, who became Minister of the Interior, which is the head of the police in political terms. And we know that since 2006, Italy has set up some anti-cult police squads that have been working, I would say, outside of the law, because there is no special law that they want to apply, using tactics, but also reaching out to the consultants in a very unclear or non-transparent way. So it seems like the activities to monitor the work of the so-called sects or cults is mainly directed by one group and one group only, that is called the Community of Pope John XXIII, which in 2019 organized a conference to sound the alarm of the phenomenon that, according to their work, is growing or was growing. And I'm sure that they say the same thing every year, but nobody checks the numbers that have been projected the year before. In 2000, in 18 apparently they had received over 2,400 requests for help. But of course, you don't know, there's no way to double check if such a figure is true. And not only they organize these conferences, and usually the news of those conferences appears in the local newspapers of the city where they organize the event, but I found also additional information on the website of the Italian State Police. They have a media outlet that is called Modern Police, Polizia Moderna. And there you can say that the victims of the phenomenon of satanic sects is increasing. Since the beginning of 2018, the Pope John 23 community has received, 2,467 requests for help, with the prevalence of contact in the northern Italy, then center, and then the south. The alarm was launched in Rome at the one Catholic university on the occasion of a conference entitled The Trap of the Sects, which was organized in collaboration with the police, and where Minister Salvini also attended, together with the Attorney General at the Court of Appeal of Catanzaro, which is a big city in the southwest of the country. And there were also other professor of psychology that also participated and had shared their view of the situation, also cautioning the isolation, exclusive attendance, idealization of leaders, change in habits, including eating habits, that are the signs that needed to be taken into consideration when talking about these things. Because this is what all these elements or these alarms were shared in 2018 when there was that government, but also 10 years before, to try and re-include in the Italian criminal code a crime that in Italian sounds like plagiarism, but it doesn't work in English. I'm sure there are different ways to translate that. I would say it's mental or psychological manipulation. The crime was deleted in the early 80s also by a decision of the Constitutional Court, because it was difficult to demonstrate that such a thing had happened. And per se, it didn't have all the elements to be considered a crime. Then, of course, if there are actions that may follow this kind of psychological manipulation that violate the criminal code, there's a different story altogether, and they should be persecuted as such. But then again, if you look at the suggestions of the minister in charge of the police on that day and before and after these specific events, there is always the agglutination of this problem together with other problems. So that at the end of the day, you don't know what you are talking about. So phenomena such as cyberbullying, alcohol, drugs, gambling, prostitutions, and sects tell us that society has serious problems, suffering from individualism, selfishness, excess of consumerism. This is what Minister Salvini said on that occasion. We need to put the family at the center of our attention, restore hope, money, certainty, and stability, and to recover the most precious asset, time. The strategy to combat the phenomenon, followed by a specialized team of investigators and the anti-cult squad, were illustrated by another gentleman who is in charge of a directorate at the state police. Over the years, a lot of organizations, and I will make a list later in my speech when I will share with you some question that I formally introduced 9 years ago as a parliamentary question that never received an answer. But in 2016, the Italian Victims of Sex Association was founded. It's a not-for-profit organization that says that it has the knowledge and intent to make it available to those who want moral support and correct information with respect to unexplored landscape characterized by many omissions and distractions by the state. So at the end of the day, the lack of an ethics state is the biggest problem here. So people want to be told how to live, how to behave, who to share their free time with. And this is a very, I think, concerning type of message that is being sent out by these anti-cult groups. In 2006, the state police created an ad hoc investigative department that is called the Anti-Sect Squad. That it says that they act in a context of crimes against the person, homicides, gender-based violence, sexual violence. That's in the explanation of Francesca Romana Capaldo, who's the deputy superintendent of the state police and head of the anti-cult squad. So nothing that has to do with religion, freedom of religion or belief. Homicide, gender-based violence, sexual violence. And she also explains that the word sect is the most suitable to describe this type of groups. There are some common characteristics: a leader with a strong personality and manipulative ability, like in any political party, for instance, with a strong dose of cynicism, like in any political party, I would say, and great criminal entrepreneurial versatility, perhaps not in any big political party, but we know that there are a lot of members of political parties in prison also for their great and entrepreneurial versatility. A pyramidal structure and a real proselytizing program. Once again, political parties could fall into that category, which is based on the weakness of the interlocutor in this situation. The group becomes the family and is pushed to donate all of its assets. And this has been said without anybody questioning the figures upon which these statements have been said. And we are talking about something that is speaking on behalf of the police. The department has opened investigation following report of former adepts, but also relatives and friends of the victim. Among the crimes that are ascribable, we find sexual or group violence, embezzlement of money, scams, fraud, or even theft of information, possession, or trafficking of drugs. So all crimes that would already have an article of the criminal code to take care of that. According to Dr. Anna Maria Giannini, who's the director and coordinator of the Lab of Applied Experimental Psychology at the University, Sapienza University in Rome, and who has been often invited to these kind of meetings, the difference between freedom of worship and manipulation is very clear. Freedom of worship, enshrined in the Constitution, as I mentioned before, draws inspiration from forms of belief or adherence to religions that do not involve illegal actions or forms of aggression and self-destruction. Manipulation, on the other hand, can lead to criminal acts. In this case, we are not talking about values, but suggestive actions carried out against someone who, cheated or deceived, is led to act in the interest, for example, of the guru of a sect. The interest can be linked to the absolute power you want to have over the other, to economic or social advantages or more. I don't know if you ever heard of anything called hooligans, but this also sounds a lot like that. So why target group that have something to do in metaphysical ways to values or ideas or ideals or religious structures that do not belong to our tradition. At the same time, and perhaps I will here I'd like to open a little parenthesis. While I was a member of Parliament, I was member of the Committee on Justice, and we had to follow for over a year a lot of hearings in which the people listed here that were collaborating with the police were cautioning the Italian legislature to reintroduce this article of psychological manipulation in the criminal court. And the reason why we did not arrive at a compromise solution after over almost 2 years of this is because not only I tried to do my best not to have that final compromise materialize, but because very Catholic members of parliament said that all this, the paragraph that I just read, could be applied to a parish or to anybody that has had a very strict, perhaps sometimes also violent, Catholic upbringing, because we know that the use of force, on the one hand, for again on pupils or young kids in some Catholic school or in the more religious institutions has been the law of the land for many years. At the same time, one could say that because of their membership in the Catholic Church, the priests have been accused of pedophilia actions and sexual harassment against boys could suffer yet additional penalties on this. So I think there is a lot of problems around this thing. Getting out of a sectarian experience is not easy, continued Dr. Giannini. Getting away is difficult precisely because of the isolation. This is practiced by convincing the victim that family members are negative entities, that they want their harm and that they are source of their suffering, while we know that the biggest number of sexual harassment cases happen within the family. This is something that we have data about. In the most fortunate cases in which it is possible to come out of what is a real nightmare, made up of violence, kidnappings, rituals, deprivation of food and sleep, the weak and the will, the person feels a very strong psychological discomfort, fails to recognize, accept, and understand how it was possible to be manipulated up to that point. Matteo Salvini, of course, made a lot of promises, but they never went to the point. They were general suggestions: strengthening the postal police, updating crimes to the era of social media, because there again is considered to be yet another evil to be combated, contrasted cyberbullying, drugs, alcohol, gambling, prostitution, sectarianism, because are obviously there in a society that has structural problems, that suffers from individualism, selfishness, and excessive consumerism. Once again, I mean, this is incredible, but we're still talking about excessive consumerism in 2018 or 2020. He was convinced that certain things cannot be solved by decree, luckily, but so we have to go back and put the family at the center of our society, and so give it resources and stability. And Italy in those days also had a special minister that was in charge of family affairs, someone who was also very, very Catholic, very conservative Catholic, and very prohibitionist when it comes also to all the other sexual and recreational revolution that Massimo Introvigne mentioned in his speech before. Let me end with what I have done as a member of parliament. It has been said before that also laws have been introduced by some, but unfortunately, those that were trying to contrast the overpower given to the police did not have too much luck. I introduced a question that I prepared with some of the people that I'm sure are in the audience today, and I want to I'll later thank them. This was introduced in November 2012, and I was questioning that the main consultant of the anti-cult squads was a priest belonging to the Pope John XXIII community, which was accredited as an expert for the first time in 2002 on the Angels of Sodom case, in which his report contributed in a decisive way for the incarceration of an alleged member of a satanic sect that never existed. So how is that possible that the police relies on the counsels of a gentleman like that? In addition to the anti-cult service of the John XXIII community, the police operates almost exclusively leaning on the Anti-Cult Forum, which is an association for research and information on cults called ARIS, the Center for Psychological Abuse Studies, CESA, and Family Victims of Sex, FAVIS, and Giù le mani dai bambini, which means hands of kids. This forum is a group that, despite not having any scientific expertise or practice in the methods of investigation or academic qualification in any of the fields that could be related to the issue of cults, is a member of FECRIS, which is a French body known for controversies or religious intolerance, and I'm sure we will hear about that later on. So I put a few questions, but I would like to concentrate on four. The question was directed to the Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of Justice, and the Ministry of Welfare, because they are the three that follow this kind of issue. What was the cost related to maintaining an anti-cult department within the police in terms of annual budget? since their establishment in 2006, and what was the cost of the consultancies, because I'm sure that these people that would collaborate with the police get some per diem or support of a sort, and what is the number of the people employed in the department. What are the academic skills of the members of this anti-cult squad, and also in relation to the scientific nature of their methods of analysis and what basis the experts that collaborate them are selected. If it was known by the Minister of Interior, Justice and Welfare that these groups of experts have the possibility of influencing the investigations of the state police, and that the Catholic priest carries out an activity of monitoring minority cults on behalf of the police itself, and if they indeed that such a thing was happening, if they believe that that was appropriate and also in line with the law. And lastly, that if the Minister of the Interior deemed it necessary to have at all an anti-cult department within the state police that works in relation to those cases, and if they should be considered a threat to public order, because this is one of the reasons why they had been established. And if the rest of the criminal proceedings initiated with the contribution of the anti-cult squads and the expert it involves confirm the need for the existence of such a department. So these questions, unfortunately, all remain. And I think they constitute a very serious violation of the rule of law. You are innocent until proven guilty. This is how it should work, not the other way around. And unfortunately, this is the model that has been applied for many years and continues to be applied by this squad. And I don't know if one day, perhaps this year is actually the 15th year of the existence of this squad, a new parliamentary question should be asked to have a list of all the successful cases being brought to the end by this squad and all their collaborators. I thank you very much for your time, and I apologize if I went a little beyond the time limit that I was given.
Thank you, Marco.